comment from you on it. We didn't get to the numbers a while ago, but on mandatory spending, we discussed interest is kind of like mandatory spending. You don't pay it, you default. Currently, it's a little over 70% of our total spending. Is that roughly correct? Mandatory, which is kind of on autopilot. And looking at what it'll be in 2026, it looks like it's going to be over 80%. So the trajectory in terms of how all this looks in the short span of 7 to 8 years gets to where we're spending more and more. And mandatory spending, again, is made up of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And then depending on how you classify interest, which to me that's somewhat mandatory, it's getting to where discretionary spending is becoming such a small part of what we do that obviously it has very little impact on changing the trajectory. So where would you, and I think just for the sake of the public, again, hearing what the main variables would be when it comes to mandatory spending, could you talk a little bit about what they are? Because it seems like no one here wants to, and lay out kind of the arithmetic and what the options would be, and avoid getting political with it, but just stick with the arithmetic.
So you are correct. 60% of current spending is mandatory, and most of that is Social Security and Medicare. But you also have Medicaid, you have nutrition assistance programs, you have farm programs. So there's a host of different programs that are mandatory spending, meaning they don't require annual appropriations. They operate automatically based on the provisions of underlying law. But by far the largest two programs that account for mandatory spending are Social Security and Medicare.
And then really, to be honest, until we tackle that, we're not really affecting the trajectory of actually lowering deficits. So that's the hard discussion that we need to have here.
I think it's going to be hard to solve the problem without looking at mandatory spending. It's such a big part of the picture.
Very good. And I think that it's all of our responsibility here on this committee to have the backbone and fortitude to start doing that, because otherwise, I think we're deceiving the American public, and that doesn't get talked about often enough, and we need to roll up our sleeves and at least be honest about what the options are. Thank you.